dualism, and the idea of karma, and even science are all constructs that have evolved out of pattern recognition, and so is nihilism, existentialism, absurdism, and minimalism versus consumerism. These are all variants of pattern recognition or preference awareness. But the fact that there are a multitude of preferences also shows that we can choose whether to accept our preferences or to discard them. Hello, and welcome to the Ancient Wisdom Modern Mind podcast. And today, I want to share with you my understanding of the mind from the perspective of rational awareness. And before we start, I would like to take a moment to remind you to subscribe to this channel. So go ahead and click on the subscribe button. The rational side of humanity can be divided into two categories of perception: preference awareness and concept construction. Preference awareness is humanity's ordinary awareness, whereas concept construction is the highest state that the rational side of the mind can achieve. And it is this preference awareness that also imprisons the mind by consuming its attention and compelling the mind to become absorbed by its preferences. And this process occurs because of the mind's innate ability to recognize patterns. Pattern recognition is an unconscious state where the brain identifies patterns that it can use to predict and expect what is coming. The brain, by making the connection between memories and information perceived, identifies familiar patterns, and from this, the individual is able to construct a mental representation of their situation. But more importantly, it also allows the individual to build a theoretical idea about what is real or relevant, and this develops an archetype for our preferred realism. Since pattern recognition is unavoidable and is the main or majority state of consciousness that most humans exist within, you could say that it is man's natural state, or that it is the comfort zone for the mind. Pattern recognition gives the mind an internal comfort, that it reassures the mind that its thoughts are the correct ones. This vindicates the mind's assumptions through perceived repetition of the pattern and perceived reoccurrence of the same patterns. This confirmation bias is then held as evidence that the mind or self is right. And although this pattern recognition is unconscious, it is also recognized at the subconscious and conscious levels, and this awareness of patterns allows us to read words, understand language, recognize friends, and even appreciate music. It also enables us to build an understanding of the world. Examples of pattern recognition from a broad perspective are the sciences such as classical physics, the evolution hypothesis, religion, and even atheism. On the more personal level, such as why we like this type of food, or this fashion style, or why that type of person is annoying, or why you fall in love, are all a consequence of pattern recognition and developing a preference awareness for a particular set of patterns. Polytheistic and modalistic religious ideas, dualism, and the idea of karma, and even science are all constructs that have evolved out of pattern recognition, and also the experience of cause and effect is an example of dualistic preference awareness, and so is nihilism, existentialism, absurdism, and minimalism versus consumerism. These are all variants of pattern recognition or preference awareness. It is not possible to ignore preference awareness, as these patterns give order to our lives. They give us meaning and purpose, but they also consume us, compel us, and drive us to obsession, forcing us to make elaborate databases with an inventory of all the patterns that the mind has a preference for. But the fact that there are a multitude of preferences also shows that we can choose whether to accept our preferences or to discard them. If we accept our preferences, then we will take them to their logical conclusions. And this then becomes our core reality, our specialty, our ideology, our religion. Ironically, preference awareness is ultimately an illusion, a subjective choice. But that doesn't mean we don't function within a matrix of subjective patterns, and nor do we reject this matrix simply because of its subjective nature. And this is probably also the most common error made in the understanding of what is reality, since most simply assume that the idea of reality is objective in the context of being physical and having a cause and effect on our lives. For example, in the context that gravity is a universal law, basic science, right? What goes up must come down. This is the dualist's understanding of reality. For the dualist, perception is from the perspective of separation. The mind and physical reality are distinct and separable. Yet mind and reality is a paradox. Reality is objective, bound by immutable laws, but it is subjectively altered by the mind's perception of reality. This is the paradox, two realities existing simultaneously. Now, I am not saying that we should reject preference or that patterns do not exist, but what I am saying is that preferences are all-consuming to the point that they affect how the mind perceives reality. The mind is compelled to see only the patterns that it has a preference for, and it is this excluding of unrelated patterns that creates and forcibly applies a subjective preference on the mind. You can choose this pattern or this pattern or this pattern, but you must choose. And this is the important differentiation that concept construction teaches us. The art is not to reject our pattern preference, or to be unattached from things, or even to reject our objective world, but to see that things are simply patterns which we apply subjectively to an objective matrix. And this unnoticed influence happens because of pattern recognition, which then absorbs the self within a web of relevant but often trivial complexity. Preference awareness is overcome by concept construction, and this is the state where the mind's comprehension of the unity of reality is as one interconnectedness, or more simply expressed, as a reasoned interconnectedness between the subjective and the objective. Concept construction has its roots in a monotheistic idea of reality. This monotheistic view focuses on the philosophical idea that there is one God, or one interconnected multi-dimensional reality, a singular divine which manifests itself in many ways, including as the Christian Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, but equally so are concepts such as mindfulness. Philosophy is also an outgrowth of this monotheistic view of reality, which uses reason to form concepts, engage in problem solving, and then form reasonable hypotheses. And likewise, so is quantum field theory, a development of concept construction. The act of mindfulness is a final development of the monotheistic view and concept construction, since mindfulness is the psychological process of bringing one's attention to experiences occurring in the present moment. And this has the effect of stepping the mind outside of its natural preferences and into a moment-by-moment awareness of the subjective nature of reality. So thank you for listening. And if you'd like to subscribe to this channel, go ahead and click on the subscribe button. And if you would like to download the audio version of this podcast, The Rational Side of Awareness, then you can purchase the audio from the links in the description. If you have the time, let me know in the comments about your experiences and understanding of mind. Here's to you and your fulfillment and growth into every tomorrow to come.